Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with everything fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So for today, what I wanted to do was a Q&A video. I actually made a post commemorating my 1,000 subscribers, which I'm so grateful to all of you guys for getting me to that milestone. It's such a breakthrough moment. And I'm really grateful to all of you guys for joining. That's all I can say. Sam asked me, what would you say is your favorite part of the journey so far? When I was doing my journey in 2021, I was getting attacked by vegans. I know it sounds crazy, right? Who's ever been attacked by a vegan? But I was legitimately being attacked by vegans. Like, they were cheering for my death. They were making fun of how I was breathing, which, as I said, I had breathing issues at that size. It was really difficult, especially considering I did gain weight after trying keto one last time in the winter of 2021, you know? Keto puts you in a state where you can gain weight very easily when you quit, and that happened, and I was huge. And so it's like, I feel good. I love that I proved people like that wrong. I think my favorite part of the journey was that moment when my night blindness went away, because I knew at that time that I had really stumbled upon something, that I had really discovered something real, and it shocked me in a good way. It completely shattered my views of diet and everything when that happened. Because it was, according to everything, something like that was never supposed to happen, and it did. And it was around that time my appetite started going down, and I started to lose fat after that. I didn't lose weight, but I lost fat. Pat Lopez says, love your channel. Do you feel the pro-thyroid diet is helpful for people on the lower end of obesity or only morbid obesity? Also, what would you want physicians to know on how to approach obese patients who struggle with starting sustainable weight loss? Resident physician here and would love to learn how to approach and educate my patients better. Our nutrition curriculum was garbage, LOL. Thank you so much, Kat. I'm so happy that you are interested. Anybody that is really wanting to help, I am so like, oh my gosh, like I said, I get chills sometimes just thinking about it. So I would say the pro-thyroid diet, it's honestly good for anybody. I think with different levels of strictness. So it really depends on how damaged your thyroid is or how awful of a state you are currently in. Because one of my best friends, she's hypothyroid and she's actually very thin. And people don't understand that you can actually become hypo by undereating as well. So it's a problem that goes both ways. Now, I don't know if this diet would be good for somebody with hyperthyroidism, you know, if their thyroid is overactive. I honestly can't say. I haven't researched it. It's not something I relate to at all, clearly. Look at my weight. I clearly don't relate to that. And it's not something that I understand. So I can't comment on that. But for people who are morbidly obese, they are vastly more likely to be hypothyroid and have a slow thyroid. But like I said, it's really about different levels of strictness. So like when I first started, I had to make sure I didn't have a drop of PUFA. I had to make sure I was only eating red meat. I couldn't tolerate anything. I couldn't tolerate even chicken, which is crazy looking back at it. And I really kept, you know, certain estrogenic foods down. Like, you just have a very strict thing, especially when you're really, really sick. But as you get healthier, you can kind of loosen up. And what is one of my biggest examples of this is I have struggled with gluten intolerance for almost 10 years. And I accidentally was exposed to gluten in November, and I didn't get super sick. I felt like, you know, like it wasn't great, but I didn't have a full body reaction anymore. And that tells me that if I continue healing, I will eventually be able to eat bread again. So it's really you have to really base it upon your individual level and where you're at health-wise individually. There is no one-size-fits-all prescription for every single person at every single level of health. However, of course, if you were to follow the strict guidelines, it would be best, because it would be the best thing for preventing obesity entirely. It would be the best thing for helping hypothyroid, even in thin people, even very thin people where they are under eating. But it's really just about what you want to do and what your body can handle. Some people, when they get healthy, they have zero issue having something like salmon. Salmon has a high amount of PUFA, but it is a natural food, and if you're not hypothyroid, or you're healthy enough, it's not going to make you swell up, or you're not going to have any of these issues. Whereas if I do at this time, I will swell up drastically. So it's super individual. But I would say that, of course, it will help at the lower ends of obesity. It's really good for people who have recently lost a lot of weight too, because weight loss in general is sort of anti-thyroid. It's kind of like a bank account, and you are withdrawing from your thyroid when you lose weight. So that's why people that lose over and over again, they're way overdrawn with their thyroid, and it's your system is what the actual are you doing? So if you were to do this protocol for a good 6 months or something, or a year, maybe not extremely strict all the time, but just staying within the guidelines for the most part, except for special occasions or something like that, right? That could restore some of that post-weight loss anxiety, a lot of the sort of mental health aspects that come from it. I do believe it is from hypothyroid. It can help with that kind of stuff, and even help with skin tightening and stuff like that, because a lot of that has to do with your thyroid health. My skin and my face has tightened and stuff, just because when you lose a lot of weight, it does tend to slow the thyroid. So I would really suggest it all the way through obesity, and even post-weight loss. For people who have lost a lot of weight, I would suggest it for them, because it will set you up to where you won't gain it back, because you can kind of put some, deposits back into your thyroid. And that's a way where you can do this. I will do this forever. As far as I am never going to eat the PUFA again. But I struggled with binge eating disorder, and I really see where it leads, because I went all the way to the end of the road. And knowing what I know and knowing what I experienced, I will never go back to eating those seed oils ever. I can't see myself ever doing it. However, things like wine, bread, maybe some nuts at times, right? More natural foods, foods that have been around for thousands of years. Yeah, I'm going to eat them again. Yes, I will. Lisa, if you're watching, Lisa, I will eat salmon again. And I will still have fried stuff if it's fried in saturated fat, but I'm never going to go back to the seed oils. So that's something I would suggest for anybody. But for me personally, I know I won't. Just because of what I went through. So I hope that answers your question. Sarah Penny says, congratulations, Alex. I'm so happy your channel is taking off. Q&A video sounds fun. And then she asked 2 questions. 1, I think many obese people, myself included, struggle with eating on every occasion. Happy, sad, depressed, anxious, bored, and so on. It becomes our number 1 emotional coping mechanism, which is obviously problematic. Do you have any healthy coping mechanisms that have worked for you that you can share with us? I think that there's two major things with most morbidly obese people that struggle with always wanting to eat for emotional reasons. And remember, this is more indicative, this is ED behavior. If you're eating for emotion, that is problematic, whether it's happy, sad, bored, anything. A lot of people that are morbidly obese that do struggle with binging, it's a way of trying to control your feelings. And I think the first step is to realize it's not about controlling every feeling you have. you can experience the feeling, but it's about controlling your reaction to the feeling. So can I just feel what I feel and just take in the information, verify it with factual data in my life, or unverify it, right? And then let it be gone. That's one thing. That's one thing that you have to do to cope, is just let yourself feel how you feel. So if you're happy, be happy. If you're sad, be sad, and let the feelings come and go and pass, like the weather, like a cloud in the sky, right? It comes and then it goes, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But don't jump onto every single feeling you have. Don't dive into every single thing because it may not be real. So you have to verify your emotions. The other factor of it is a lot of times people will eat a lot for emotional reasons if they are suppressing themselves. So this is something I talked about in my long form fat acceptance TikTok video, where I talked about the suppression aspects and how a lot of times different identity groups can be disproportionately encouraged to suppress themselves. And that's the experience of a lot of minorities, a lot of gay people, but not always. It can also be white people, or men, right, that are told to suppress themselves. It's really anybody who internalized those messages and is now overweight. So I think what's important about it, and even if you're not overweight, it's still important, but it's just people tend to binge because of it. So what you really have to do is allow yourself to be a full human being. Don't feel that you have to suppress yourself. You have a right to, you're just like anyone else. And you have a right to your feelings, you have a right to your words, your thoughts, your actions, your choices, right? You have a right to all these things. And a lot of fat people, they're usually either trapped in people-pleasing behaviors or having no boundaries. It's really, really common. And so it's really about not being that way at all. Not to be totally nasty, but the way that I put it is, if you are a nasty person, just be nasty, because suppressing it is going to make you binge. And if you are a horrible, nasty person, you're going to have to work on yourself, but don't use your obesity as a form of morality or as a moral limit. And I do think a lot of people do that in the fat community as well. Your morality should come from religion, your principles, whatever it is, but not obesity. Don't let your fat limit you so that you don't go crazy. Just work on yourself so you don't need that, because I do see that a lot with people. So that's one thing. I think a lot of people, they want to be overweight because they feel like if they lost weight, they just go be a huge hoe or something, and they're worried about it. It's you don't have to go be a hoe. You have a right to your body, in the sense of what you choose to do with it. And regardless of if you're thin or not, it's called self-control. Right? If that's not what you want to be or what you want to do, then don't do it. Don't use your weight to maintain that, because that's a very unhealthy mindset. The last thing is, a lot of morbidly obese people do not understand hobbies. So one of the things that drastically helped me with binge eating, aside from the other two things I said, was knitting. So I think what's really important is that a lot of us, because we're in such a hypothyroid state, we are anxious, because that is one of the earliest symptoms of hypothyroidism, is unexplainable anxiety. It's usually mild at first, but when you're morbidly obese and huge, your anxiety can be really, really drastic. And so what can really help is, I believe, something sensory wise. So for me personally, it was knitting, because knitting is a sensory experience. It's your hands. It's something that you can feel and touch and do whenever you want. So whether you can do knitting or you can think of something else, like whether it's, I would suggest things like playing with clay or, just something sensory related. I think that that's really important because oftentimes fat people eat out of boredom and they're craving a physical sensation. So find a hobby that has to do with stuff like that. That's what I would suggest. Just so that you have that stimulation, or you have something that you can do while you watch TV, or you have something where you can put your anxiety into. And I'm sure that there's many different things to do. Just for me personally, and as a really great example, it was knitting. So that as well, having a hobby is really, really important. That will really help you. Okay, so her second question is, what are your feelings about artificial sweeteners during a pro-thyroid weight loss journey? Friend or foe? For me personally, things like Coke Zero make me want to binge like nothing else. I completely avoid them now, but some people seem to be okay. So I think this topic is definitely one of those things where ideally you would never do it because sugar isn't bad, so just have sugar, essentially, is my first thing. Of course, when you're losing weight though, you typically have to consider calories. And so there are certain things that you may have to do at times, like have low-fat dairy, for example, to save calories, or have an artificial sweetener to sweeten a drink or a coffee without the calories of sugar. I understand that. So, like I said, any weight loss really is anti-thyroid. You just have to make sure that you're doing everything to bolster your thyroid and you'll lose fine. Like, you'll be fine. When it comes to sweeteners, I will use something like stevia or monk, what is it? Oh my gosh, monk fruit, I think. Like a more naturalistic artificial sweetener is better in my opinion, because things like aspartame, they are very problematic. Sucralose, problematic. Like these things do have damaging effects for anybody, thyroid or not. What I will say though is that when you have something sweet, typically your body does not feel like, it doesn't see it as different than sugar. So it can release insulin and therefore make you hungry. And that may be what you're feeling. So I would suggest never having an artificial sweetener unless if it's with a meal. So like if you're just chilling between your meals, I would not suggest it. If you're having coffee with your breakfast and you put sweetener in it, that's fine. If you put like stevia in it or whatever, that would be fine because it's not going to affect your hunger. As long as you're actually getting some carbs, your body will kind of normalize. So, like I said, it's definitely one of those in-between things. I think ideally you wouldn't, but like I said, nobody's perfect and you can utilize it in a way that is better. Let's go ahead and move on to Lisa. So, she asks, what are the 5 biggest health and diet myths people need to stop spreading? Whew, 5. So I did think about this a bit before I did this video, but the first one I would say is that sugar is bad for you. That one needs to go. It is not bad for you. It's extremely frustrating. It is something that people are so indoctrinated into believing. It is actually crazy. But the more that we avoid sugar, the fatter everybody becomes. So what you have to really understand is it's not the sugar. It's sugar plus PUFA. It's sugar with no potassium in your system. Sugar with no vitamin C. That's the issue. But sugar in and of itself is not a problem. So that's the first myth. The second myth I would say is the whole no pain, no gain mindset at the gym or with working out. It is not necessarily good because with certain workouts, you can actually cause more harm to your thyroid. And especially if you're morbidly obese, something like high-intensity interval training is a terrible idea. Anything that has you gasping for breath, it's actually making you more hypo. So, and that's true for athletes as well, but they just may be healthier or maybe not. You know, a lot of athletes are hypo without realizing it because they overtrain and they do these really harsh things all the time, and then they don't sleep, and then they eat in a calorie deficit. Like, if you do all that combined, it's really tough. Now, a thin person, they can get away with hardcore workouts if they sleep and if they eat more calories, like if they're not in a deficit. But as obviously for a morbidly obese person, you ideally will end up in a, well, not ideally, to lose weight, you will end up in a calorie deficit. So this whole no pain, no gain mindset, horrible. Just lift weights, walk, do things that are more low impact. Don't be gasping for breath. No pain, no gain is a myth. The other thing I would say, my third one, is that weight loss is quick, that you can lose weight fast. You cannot lose weight fast. If you are morbidly obese, as I've stated, or super morbidly obese especially, your journey will take between 3 and 4 years. It is a long-term process. It's not short. One of the biggest harms the Biggest Loser did was teach people that they could lose hundreds of pounds in a few months healthfully. A lot of those people drastically rebound all their weight because they do it in an extremely damaging way to their thyroid health. So there's a huge rebound with those people. The fourth one is that there are no bad foods. So that's something extremely frustrating that you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, who cares? There's nothing wrong with this. Like the seed oils. There is definitely something wrong with the seed oils. So people will say that because they'll kind of do this whole like, oh, you know, I'm so smart and I'm so this. It's only calories. That's all that matters. And it's absolutely false. In fact, I would encourage anybody who wants to say that, make sure you eat a lot of seed oils and tell me how you feel in a few months. And let me know if you gained weight, because I guarantee you will. The last myth that needs to stop spreading is the idea that every single fat person is morbidly obese because of addiction. So there is a huge subset of people that get there because of addiction, but they're often not staying there because of addiction. And I think that that's really important because a lot of times when you are having an issue of binge eating, it's usually for a season or a spell. You usually don't binge every single day for 15 years straight. It's usually around certain traumas or whatever, or certain stressful times of your life where you're doing it. But the issue is the weight loss strategies that are given to us are not helpful and just lead to hunger or nutrient depletion, which increases hunger and contributes to hypothyroidism, which ultimately makes it worse and even harder to lose long term. So I think that that's something that a lot of thin people do not understand, is it's not always addiction. There are people that maybe have different issues with food, where they're just sort of systematically overeating by like 200 or 300 calories a day, and then over time they're putting on weight. It's not always like massively eating 7,000 calories like I used to do, 7,500 a day in 2018, like when I was at one of my worst moments of my BED. That's not everybody's experience, so don't assume that. And I don't think it's good to assume things about people that are at a certain weight because you don't necessarily know. The only thing you can likely assume is that they have thyroid issues, that they're probably hypo. Sophia says, would love to hear about how your thought process on diet and such has evolved over the course of your life. I know you've touched on it a bit, but it's always interesting to hear how others interpret their own individual journeys with these things. Love your channel also. Your honesty and nuance is really inspiring. I hope you accomplish everything you're working towards. Thank you. So my dieting process was really typical. When I was in 5th grade, I was diagnosed with a fatty liver, and I went to a nutritionist, and they told me to eat a bunch of whole grains and to avoid all fat. So they said, don't eat any fat, don't eat any saturated fat. And I tried to do the diet, and I was starving. I was starving. And so my mom would try to do it with me. We'd both starve and we'd go get McDonald's. We'd go get Carl's Jr. We'd go get fast food. It would never last because we were so hungry. And I remember one of my thought processes being, well, if fat is bad, then I'll just eat a bunch of sugar instead. And it's like you just sort of find ways to work around things, and it ends up being worse in a way, because a lot of times I would eat stuff like chips because I felt like chips were healthier than other forms of junk food. And I know now that that's the exact opposite, because people say so much sugar is bad and saturated fat is bad, so you think polyunsaturated fat is okay. And so I ate so much of that, and I would get worse and worse and worse throughout the years. And, you know, I did paleo, but I call it at this point poofaleo, because I would eat a lot of nuts. I was eating huge amounts of nuts and cutting out dairy, and it was not pro-thyroid. Then I would eat low carb. Low carb in general is not pro-thyroid. Then I would try to eat vegan. Vegan is not pro-thyroid because you require saturated fat and you require protein, especially animal protein, to properly create thyroid hormone. So oftentimes vegans over time, they develop hypothyroidism and it gets worse and worse and worse. And this is why we see the vegan stereotype of having no sense of humor, of being really aggressive, of yelling at everybody. Like, these are all symptoms of severe hypothyroidism and being extremely estrogen-y, as I call it, or having a lot of estrogen in their body, because your liver also needs protein to get rid of excess estrogen, just like it needs fructose to do so. So you can see the problem if you deprive yourself of those things. And I did all that. I did all of it. And it really crescendoed with a lot of binging in between, of course, but it really crescendoed in 2018 and 19 when I did a hardcore, strict ketogenic diet, because I was so frustrated with being fat and I just didn't want to be fat anymore. That was when I went into it with I hate my body, I hate how I look, I don't want to be fat anymore, I don't even care if it's healthy anymore. And I lost 80 pounds twice, gained it back twice, and then by 2020, I was completely fucked. Completely fucked. My mental health was getting worse and worse. I was developing so many issues within relationships with people. I also was going through traumatic events at the time, and I had no ability to handle stress whatsoever. So I could not handle anything. I couldn't move on from anything. I got to a point where I was so angry, like I wanted to cut every single person out of my life. Like, it was bad. Like, my mental health effects from doing ketogenic were so severe. I almost lost my relationship because I could tell, like, the way I was treating him, it was not going to last if I kept going. I almost cut ties with my mom. Like, it got really, really serious on a mental level, because for me personally, my hypothyroidism, it goes after my mental health first and then the physical. So when I was keto and I was super massively hypo, like, it took me to a whole other level, it really fucked me up. And it fucked me up mentally and physically. And I crashed. I lost all my energy. I blew out my adrenals in 2020. And I started eating carbs because I went through my cats passing away. And it was just too traumatic. And like I told you guys, I couldn't handle stress at all. I had no resources. My adrenals were blown out. And I just started binging. And I gained all the way back in 2020. It was so horrible. And I kept trying to do keto. And the third time I tried to lose weight, it wouldn't come off. And it was like, something's wrong. Like, I could tell something was wrong. I was looking really, really rough, and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So I would say, like, over time, you know, I went from the more traditional mindset of no pain, no gain. If, you know, you have to just do it, like, force it, white knuckle it, right? I had all these different mindsets. But when I came to the ProThyroid protocol, I was just like, everything I've tried has not worked. And honestly, if I end up dying, then oh well, this is the last thing I can try, essentially. But it worked. But that's why, like, I was eating so much candy, so much potatoes, so much bacon, so much fat, so much of everything, because I was so severely hypothyroid because of all the damage I had done. Now, that's not going to be a typical person, but that was my case in an extreme case. But it came from all of that stuff, and coming to this journey, my whole mindset had to shift and had to become about putting my health first, putting my body first, even if I knew I wasn't going to lose weight. And it's been almost 2 years, and I just started losing after a year and a half, really. It's like I had to invest all that time and effort into my health, and it has been really healing, but also very difficult for me. I was a very social person. I would go out, I would do things, I would do all this kind of stuff, and I had to live a life of relative isolation because I really had to restore my body. And it was tough for me. It was really tough because I had never prioritized my body. I think it really is important to come from a place of patience and self-care when it comes to this, and acknowledging how ill you are. And I think in the diet space and in the anti-fat space, there is this idea that the most loving thing you can do is to lose the weight as fast as possible, and it can actually be even more damaging to try to do that. The most loving thing you can do is give your body the nutrition it needs, and give your body the time it needs to heal. That's the most loving thing you can do. And some of the first benefits I had were my mental health benefits. And as far as how I think and feel today, it is like night and day. It is crazy how I used to feel compared to how I feel now, mentally. And that was what kept me going, was the mental health benefits that I had really fast, because I didn't have physical benefits. Like I said, I even put on weight in the beginning. But now I am starting to lose, and it's like, it's just really cool. And I'm also glad that I can kind of show you guys while I'm losing. But I don't ever want you guys to think that I just started, like me personally, that I just started this and I immediately started losing. No, it was a year and a half before I started losing, like, actual weight. I did start losing fat 6 months in. So my body comp started shifting 6 months in. But the first 3 months I was gaining. So it's like, I do want you guys to know that too. If you're super severe, that will happen. And why? Because I had deprived myself of carbs so much, whenever I had a little bit, I could not control it. My body would freak out. But that's specifically because I was keto. So it's like, not everybody's going to have that experience. And if you're not super morbidly obese, or you're just obese, you're just morbidly obese, you may be able to just start losing immediately. It really depends on where you're at. But I definitely was at the bottom. So with that, I'd like to close, I guess. Thank you guys so much for your questions. I really enjoyed this. Let me know if you guys would like me to do this more regularly, even if it was bi-weekly, weekly even, or at least once a month. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And I will talk to you guys again very soon. Thank you so much. Bye.